The winding road disappeared beneath the fresh snow, and Clara gripped the steering wheel tightly, feeling the symbolic weight of each curve. After so many years of fighting to prove her worth, she had finally reached the top. Literally. The house, shining in the cold winter light, was not just a financial achievement, but a silent trophy. There she could breathe without the shadow of her brother looming over her. The air was thin and icy, and the wind bit her face like small, painful memories. Clara parked the car, turned off the engine, and stood for a few seconds, watching the reflection of the headlights on the wooden facade. She remembered the Christmases she spent alone, while Raphael posted photos surrounded by family, smiles, and toasts. Loneliness was an old ghost, but this time, she would welcome it with her head held high. As she entered, the smell of new wood enveloped her like a cold embrace. Every detail of the house had been chosen by her. The rustic flooring, the large windows, the fireplace in the center of the living room. Everything screamed independence, a stark contrast to her years of emotional dependence. As she lit the fire, Clara smiled. Now the stage is set. Night fell slowly over the mountains, and the silence was almost sacred. She made herself a cup of tea, sat in the armchair, and opened her laptop to check her holiday messages. As always, Raphael had posted a toast with the caption, "Family is everything." Clara let out a dry laugh, the sound echoing in the empty room. Family, she thought, a word that had always meant they, never she. Outside, the snow continued to fall. Clara watched each flake land on the window pane as if it were a reminder of the past she was about to bury. She took out her phone, took a picture of the view, and wrote, "First Christmas in my new house. Alone, but at peace." She posted it without hesitation. She knew the message would be seen. She knew exactly by whom. That night, Clara dreamed of the past. She saw herself as a teenager, holding a letter in her hand, the white envelope, the university's gold crest, and the empty space just beyond. In the dream, the envelope disappeared, carried by the wind, and Raphael smiled. She woke in cold sweat, her heart racing. The memory she'd been trying to forget was back, pulsing with life. At dawn, the light flooded the room with a bluish glow. Clara opened the curtains and felt the thrill of satisfaction. She had gone upstairs alone, and now everyone would see what that meant. The sound of her cell phone interrupted the moment. A notification in the family group. "Clara, dear, what a beautiful house," her mother wrote. Raphael responded with a simple applause emoji. The game was on. Clara responded politely, without emotion. The subtext was clear, but no one dared to mention it. After years of being invisible, she was now the center of attention, and this time, of her own free will. The house, the snow, the silence, everything conspired in her favor. As the day drew to a close, she packed her bags, lit candles, and played soft music. The fire's reflection danced on the walls, and Clara, alone in the midst of it all, murmured to herself, "This will be the Christmas everyone remembers me." The sound of her own voice seemed to seal a pact.
The fireplace crackled loudly, throwing out golden sparks. Outside, the wind howled as if heralding something to come. Clara smiled. Revenge, like snow, always comes slowly, but covers everything when it falls. Have you ever been forgotten by the people who should remember you most? Then this story is for you. Subscribe now and see how far a wounded soul can go to free itself from the past. Each episode here is a dive into the most human and darkest side of revenge. 2 days later, Clara's post had spread through the family group, and the messages began to pour in. "Honey, we need to make plans to visit. You've always been so hardworking." compliments never before heard. Clara read each word as if deciphering an old lie. She knew it wasn't affection, it was curiosity, and maybe guilt. The call came in the afternoon. Elena, the mother, with a sweet voice, asked if they could spend Christmas together in the new house. "It'll be good, daughter, the family together again." Clara held back a laugh. This was exactly what she wanted, all together, under the same roof, surrounded by walls that would hear everything. "Of course, Mom," she replied calmly. "It'll be unforgettable." After hanging up, Clara stood silently, staring into the blazing fireplace. The fire reflected in her eyes, and a different gleam appeared there. Cold, calculated. She took out a notebook and began writing down names, times, and small details. The preparation was meticulous. "If you want a family Christmas," she murmured, "you'll have the Christmas you deserve." In the following days, the house came to life. Clara decorated it to perfection. White lights, discreet decorations, a long table with new china. Every detail had a symbolic purpose. No red, just cool, almost funeral tones. Beauty hid poison. When she finished, she looked around and felt something she'd never felt before. Power. For the first time, she was calling the shots. She grabbed her phone and posted new photos, captioned, "Preparing Christmas for my family. It's going to be special." Raphael liked the post. Clara noticed. He took the bait. As the day approached, the atmosphere seemed denser, almost electric. Her mother's messages became invasive. "Did you buy extra pillows? Raphael is going to need a bigger room, poor thing." Clara answered everything calmly, keeping her tone sweet. Poison worked best when dissolved in kindness. The night before, she prepared dinner alone, savoring the silence. She imagined her parents' expressions as they saw her new life, needing no one. Raphael couldn't stand being overshadowed, and Clara knew it. The house would be his mirror, and the reflection would destroy him.
That night, the wind roared stronger. Clara, sitting at the table, looked at the empty place in front of her. She remembered all the invitations that never came, the photos they never took together. Now, time had reversed the roles. It was she who would choose who would sit at the table. As he closed the doors and turned out the lights, he murmured softly, "Bring on Christmas." Outside, snowflakes continued to fall, soft, silent, relentless. The morning of the 23rd arrived silently, shrouded in a thick fog that engulfed the mountains. Clara woke early, driven by a restlessness she couldn't name. As the coffee brewed, the sound of rising bubbles reminded him of the heavy breathing of the past, something about to explode. He walked to the guest room and opened the boxes he hadn't yet unpacked. Among the old books and notebooks from her youth, an envelope slipped and fell to the floor. Clara picked it up carefully, feeling the rough paper beneath her fingers. The university's golden crest gleamed in the morning light. For a moment, the air left her lungs. She opened the envelope with trembling hands and read what she had always suspected. Letter of acceptance. A chill ran down her spine, unlike the winter outside. The date stamped in the corner confirmed her nightmare. It was the same year Raphael had told her she wasn't accepted. For years she had carried the weight of failure, believing herself inadequate. Now she had concrete proof that she had been betrayed. By him. Clara sat on the floor, the paper on her lap, and tears fell silently. It wasn't sadness. It was old, crystallized anger. The memory of the day her brother had comforted her with a fake smile came back sharply. "You'll have other chances," he'd said. Now she knew he'd already taken hers. With a firm movement, Clara wiped away her tears and stood. She put the letter inside a new envelope and locked it in a drawer. The discovery didn't weaken her. It fueled her. Revenge wouldn't be impulsive, it would be surgical. And it would begin in 2 days at the dinner table. Later, Clara grabbed her laptop and began jotting down memories, dates, and small details. She made a list of moments when Raphael had sabotaged her life. Comments, omissions, manipulations. The document was titled, Evidence. As she saved the file, the click sounded like the snap of a trap. As the sun set, she walked to the porch. The cold wind bit her face, but the feeling of control warmed her insides. Below, the snow-covered road felt like a white scar on the world. You took away my future, Raphael. Now I'm going to take away your present. That night, Clara lit the fireplace and watched the flames reflect off the glass. The sparks rose like burning memories, memories she was finally letting die. When the fire died down, the silence seemed content, complicit. Fate was in motion.
And so, amid the crackling of the embers and the echo of the wind, Clara realized something. The past no longer needed to be forgotten. It would be used and weaponized. The sound of the engine broke the silence of the next morning. Clara looked out the window and saw her parents' car driving up the icy road. Her heart beat fast, but not from nervousness, from anticipation. The first act was about to begin. Helena got out of the car first, wearing an expensive coat and a haughty expression. "My daughter!" she exclaimed, stretching out her arms as if love could erase years of distance. Paolo followed, with the same tired look as always. Raphael was last. Sunglasses, a ready smile, expensive perfume, a successful disguise. "So this is your refuge," he said, looking around with a half-smile. Clara calmly replied, "My home. I earned it myself." The tone was sweet, but the subtext was a blade. His mother pretended not to notice. Paolo, nervous, ran his hands through his pockets. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Inside the house, the atmosphere was even colder than outside. Clara served coffee, listened to the insincere compliments about the decor, and smiled mechanically. Raphael walked around the room as if inspecting enemy territory. "You've always been a stickler for detail, huh?" "I learned from the best," she replied. The following hours were a parade of poisoned pleasantries. Helena praised her daughter's success, but couldn't resist small digs. "In the end, family is what matters most," she repeated like a mantra. Clara simply nodded, imagining the moment when that phrase would lose its meaning forever. As afternoon fell, the sun gilded the mountains and cast long shadows across the living room floor. Clara watched the reflection of the family gathered in the window. On the outside, they seemed happy. On the inside, they were strangers brought together by guilt and appearance. The perfect setting for what was to come. During dinner, Raphael dominated the conversation, boasting about past accomplishments. He spoke of travels, contacts, and opportunities. Clara simply listened, studying his gestures as if memorizing the behavior of prey. "You seem quieter than before," he said, smiling. "Maybe I've learned to listen better," he replied. Later, when everyone had retired, Clara sat alone in the living room, watching the lights twinkle on the Christmas tree. She took the envelope with the letter and put it in her coat pocket. Tomorrow, she thought, would be the day to set the first piece in motion. Outside, the blizzard intensified, covering everything in a layer of white. Raphael slept in the guest room, Helena and Paolo upstairs, and Clara, standing at the window, smiled one last time before the chaos. What a beautiful night to start over.
Christmas dinner began with forced laughter and the clanging of silverware against china. Clara had prepared each dish perfectly, observing how her parents and Raphael behaved in the face of the abundance. Helena praised everything, though her voice carried the same tone of disguised superiority. Raphael, as always, monopolized the space with success stories, interrupting any attempted dialogue. "You always liked to impress, didn't you, Raphael?" Clara said, pouring the wine. He smiled with a false air of modesty. "I'm just sharing experiences. Not everyone is so lucky." The provocation was subtle, but Clara felt the blow and replied without hesitation. "Or maybe not everyone needs help to get where they are." Silence was immediate. Helena laughed nervously, trying to diffuse the tension. "Oh, you two. You're still like children." Paolo muttered something inaudible, his gaze fixed on his plate. Clara raised her glass and forced the toast. "To our achievements, and to the paths we choose to walk alone." The sound of the crystal breaking the silence seemed like a premonition. The conversation resumed with effort. Raphael tried to regain control, talking about important contacts and a new business opportunity. Clara feigned interest, but she observed every expression: the artificial self-confidence, the arrogant look, the nervous tick when someone contradicted him. This was the same man who had once stolen her future. During dessert, Clara discreetly glanced at her watch. Every minute seemed calculated. She knew the tension was still just a breeze before the storm. She wanted Raphael to feel comfortable enough to let his guard down. "You've always had everything under control, haven't you?" she asked softly. He smiled with confidence. "Always." The lights flickered, reflecting off the blood-dark wine. Helena talked about family traditions, trying to maintain a semblance of normalcy. But the air was heavy, and her words seemed to echo distortedly. Clara noticed that everyone avoided looking at each other for more than a few seconds. When dinner was over, she cleared the plates and stared at the wine-stained tablecloth, a slowly spreading stain, reminiscent of blood on snow. Raphael laughed loudly in the living room. Helena chatted about her New Year's plans. Everything seemed so normal, it was almost grotesque. Before going to sleep, Clara passed by her brother's room. The door was ajar. He was talking on the phone, his voice low and urgent. "No, I haven't managed to do it yet, but I'll figure it out after Christmas." She backed away slowly, her heart racing. His mask was beginning to crack. That night, as Clara lay in bed, she stared at the ceiling and smiled mirthlessly. The first toast had been made, and with it the first step. The perfect dinner was over. Now the real game began.
Dawn brought a deceptive calm. Clara woke before the others, the air in the house still thick with the scent of wine and tension. She walked to the kitchen, silently making coffee. Every sound, the creak of the kettle, the creak of the wood, seemed to echo in a calculated rhythm, as if the room were alive, attentive. While waiting for the water to boil, Clara opened her desk drawer again. She took out the envelope containing the letter and examined it in the morning light. The faded ink, the torn seal, the golden coat of arms, evidence of a moral crime. She took a photo with her cell phone and saved it in a hidden folder labeled Christmas. Raphael came down shortly after, yawning and looking superior. "You wake up too early," he said, reaching for a cup. Clara smiled, without answering. "I had troubled dreams." "About what?" he asked, curiously. "About the past." His gaze wavered for a moment. Clara noticed, pleased. During the morning, she cleaned the house while discreetly observing the family's every move. Helena complained about the cold. Paolo tried to adjust the heater. Raphael talked worriedly on his cell phone. Clara feigned distraction but recorded every fragment in her mind, every sentence that could be used later. Late that afternoon, she locked herself in her office and began recording voice messages to herself, like notes. Day 24. Raphael confirmed anxious behavior. Helena avoids confrontation. Paolo keeps quiet. Her voice sounded cold, methodical, almost scientific. It was a hunter's diary. As she spoke, she felt a memory emerge, the day Raphael hid the letter. She remembered him coming into her room, smiling, saying he would clean up the mess. Back then, she had trusted him. Now the memory was accompanied by the sound of betrayal. Later, Clara went for a walk in the snow. The cold wind stung her face, but the silence of the mountains was liberating. They don't realize it, she thought. They still think I'm the same girl who swallowed what they said. But I wasn't. She had learned to hide her wits behind smiles. Back home, she found Raphael in the living room, fiddling with his laptop. "Curious?" she asked, forcing lightness. "I was just looking for Wi-Fi," he replied. Her smile was slow and calculated. "Everything's connected here, Raphael. Nothing goes unnoticed." He laughed, but looked away. That night, as the wind roared outside, Clara reviewed the recordings and saved them to a flash drive. If they want a family Christmas, they'll have one to remember for the rest of their lives. The fire in the fireplace reflected in her eyes, and within them, the glow of what was to come. Night fell thickly over the mountains, and the house seemed to breathe with the wind. The scent of cinnamon and mulled wine filled the air, but the mood was different. A silent tension that spread like smoke. Clara, standing in front of the mirror, fixed her hair and studied her reflection. "Today," she whispered, "the masks will fall."
In the living room, the table was set with almost military precision. White china, clear glasses, tall candles casting dancing shadows on the walls. The family gathered little by little, their footsteps muffled by the carpet. Helena smiled nervously. "Everything's beautiful, dear." Clara replied calmly, "I wanted it to be perfect. After all, it's our first Christmas together in a long time." Dinner began with exchanged glances and trivial comments. Raphael tried to dominate the conversation, as always, but his voice seemed to echo in a colder atmosphere. Clara let him speak, waiting for the right moment. The wine was poured, and the laughter sounded artificial, until she broke the pattern. "Do you remember that year I didn't get into college?" Silence fell like a blade. Raphael cleared his throat. Yes, a shame. Things don't always work out." Clara twirled the glass between her fingers, her eyes fixed on him. "Curious. I found something interesting yesterday. An old envelope with the university crest." Helena froze. Paolo lowered his gaze. Raphael forced a laugh. "Ha, must be a mistake." Clara kept her tone light. "Mistake, maybe, or forgetfulness. Sometimes we keep things that aren't ours, don't we, Raphael?" He stopped chewing, his fork suspended in midair. "What do you mean by that?" Clara leaned across the table, her gaze serene. "I think you know." Helena intervened nervously. "Clara, please, don't turn dinner into a drama." But her daughter didn't back down. "Drama is what they made of my life. I just want a toast to the truth." She raised her glass and looked at everyone. "To the lies that keep families together." The sound of the crystal clinking sounded like a shattered glass. Raphael tried to change the subject, but the color in his face betrayed his discomfort. Helena avoided looking at him. Paolo remained motionless, his hands trembling on his napkin. Clara smiled, satisfied. The first crack had appeared, and now all that was left was to wait for the ice to break. When dinner ended, the tension lingered. Clara collected the dishes in silence, listening to the family's footsteps fade away. In the hallway, she muttered softly, "Appetite is lost when the truth begins to be served." The next morning dawned gray and cold. Clara awoke early, the sound of wind whistling against the windows. The atmosphere was heavy, the kind of silence that precedes an explosion. She made coffee and watched Raphael come downstairs, visibly irritated. "Do you want to repeat yesterday's show?" he teased. Clara just smiled. "No, today I want to play." Helena entered soon after, with dark circles under her eyes and a tired voice. "Clara, what was that? You ruined dinner." Clara remained calm.
Did I ruin it, or did I reveal it? Her mother sighed in exasperation. You always create problems. She replied with cutting gentleness. And you always pretend they don't exist.
During coffee, Raphael tried to take control again, throwing out small provocations. It's funny you should talk about lives, Clara. You've always been good at hiding your feelings. She replied without hesitation, and you've always been good at hiding your stealing. His cup shook slightly, and coffee spilled onto the table. Later, Clara proposed a memory game to lighten the mood. Helena hesitated, but eventually agreed. Everyone will remember a memorable moment from their childhood, Clara explained, smiling. Raphael rolled his eyes. What a waste of time. Oh, it'll be fun, he insisted. Maybe we'll discover what we've been forgetting. The memories began lightly. Trips, birthdays, old laughs. Then Clara dropped the bombshell. I remember the day Raphael picked up my letters at the post office. It was the same month the university sent me a reply. Her voice was calm, almost sweet. Raphael was speechless. Helena tried to laugh. Clara, please. But Clara continued, merciless. Funny, Mom. He never gave me anything. And yesterday, I found an envelope with the stamp torn. It was in his things. The air grew heavy. Paolo looked at the floor. Raphael stood up abruptly. You're delirious. Clara stared at him calmly. If I am, then why are you trembling? The sentence cut through the air like cracking ice. Raphael took a step back, his gaze flickering between anger and fear. Helena tried to control the situation, but her voice was breaking. Enough, Clara! Clara stood slowly, bracing her hands on the table. No, Mother, not yet. I just want the truth, that's all. The fireplace crackled behind her, as if the fire were applauding. The game was over, and the memory was beginning to take its toll. Night fell with a colder than usual. The wind rattled the windows, and the sky, covered in dense clouds, seemed to hide something beyond the snow. Inside the house, the silence was almost absolute. Raphael and Elena had locked themselves in their rooms, and Paolo remained in the living room, lost in thoughts he dared not confess. Clara, however, was not asleep. She was simply waiting. She walked down the stairs barefoot, moving carefully. The dim light from the fireplace illuminated the wooden floor. The envelope containing the letter rested on the table like a trophy. Clara opened it again, just to feel the power it held. The faded ink still felt alive to him, as if each word pulsed with the echo of a stolen life. From the hallway, a noise interrupted the silence. Raphael. He was coming down, his expression hard and his eyes clouded with anger. You had fun last night, didn't you? He asked, his tone unmistakable. Clara maintained control, sitting back in the armchair. It was a good evening. Truths always warm more than wine. Raphael approached, his face tense. You don't know what you are messing with. Yes, I do, he replied. Old lies, and they stink, Raphael. He took a deep breath, his jaw clenched.
You're not going to destroy what's left of our family. Clara gave a faint smile. I'm just pulling the rug out from under you. The silence between them was broken only by the crackling of the fire. Raphael glanced at the envelope on the table and took a step forward, but Clara was quicker. Touch this and I'll let the world know what you've done. Her voice was low but firm. For the first time, he hesitated. You're sick, he murmured, turning away. No, Raphael, Clara replied calmly. Sick is the one who steals the future of others and pretends to be innocent. He left the room without another word, and Clara remained motionless, watching the fire consume a splinter of wood, slowly, inexorably. Hours later, the blizzard began. The house shook under the roar of the wind, and the lights flickered. The isolation was now complete. The road was covered. None of them could leave, even if they wanted to. Clara smiled. "Perfect," she murmured. "Now no one's going anywhere." She sat down in front of the fire again and recorded a new message on her cell phone. Day 25. Raphael is showing fear. The blizzard has started. This is the perfect time. She put the phone away and closed her eyes. The winter outside was freezing the world, but inside her, the fire only grew. Dawn arrived along with the blackout. The lights in the house went out with a sharp snap, leaving only the flickering glow of the fireplace. Helena screamed from upstairs, and Paolo ran to calm his wife. Raphael appeared on the stairs, irritated. What happened now? Clara, already standing, replied matter-of-factly. The generator couldn't handle the blizzard, but maybe it's a good time for a game. Helena blinked, confused. Game? Yes, Clara said, lighting candles and placing them on the table. The truth game, to lighten the mood. Raphael laughed scornfully. You're crazy. Maybe, but we'll play anyway. The mother protested, but the cold and tension eventually forced them to give in. Clara placed 4 cards face down on the table. Each one has a question. Whoever refuses to answer, drinks. Raphael crossed his arms. This is ridiculous. Then don't be afraid. The first letter was for Helena. What was your biggest lie? She hesitated, looking at her husband. Maybe saying everything was fine when it wasn't. Clara raised her eyebrows in satisfaction. Interesting. The second letter fell into Raphael's hands. What have you stolen and never told anyone about? He froze. The sound of the wind outside grew louder, as if the mountain itself awaited his answer. Raphael laughed tensely. That's a stupid joke. Answer, Clara said firmly, or drink. He picked up the glass and downed the wine in one gulp. There, happy now?
Not at all, she replied, but it will be. Clara pulled out another letter, this time for herself. What would you do if you could go back in time? She smiled without hesitation. I would open every letter that belonged to me. The impact of the sentence echoed in the dark room. Helena stood up, trembling. Enough, Clara, this is over. Clara stood up too, the candle trembling in her hand. Is it over? Not for me. While you slept peacefully, I believed I was a failure, that I wasn't good enough. But now I know, and I'll remind you all. Raphael stepped forward, his eyes flashing. You'll regret touching that. Clara gave a cold smile. I've already waited 10 years, brother. Now it's your turn to wait. The flame flickered, and for a moment everyone was silent. Outside, the sound of the storm mingled with their breathing. The truth game had begun, and no one would emerge unscathed. The sound of the storm echoed like a distant roar. The candles cast distorted shadows on the walls, and the heat from the fireplace was no longer enough to warm the room. Clara remained standing before the family, her eyes fixed on Raphael, who was breathing rapidly, his face sweaty. Shall we continue? She asked, with a calm smile that hid a fury that had been suppressed for years. Enough of this, Clara, Helena shouted, pounding the table. You're ruining Christmas. Clara turned slowly to her. Christmas was ruined a long time ago, Mother. Only now you see it. Paolo tried to intervene, his voice low. Daughter, this won't change the past. No, Father, she replied, but it will reveal who destroyed it. Raphael stood up, his fists clenched. What do you want me to say? That I hid that letter? That I couldn't bear to see you better than me?" The confession came out like a scream, tearing through the air. Helena clapped her mouth, and Paolo remained motionless. Clara kept her gaze steady. "Yes, that's what I want to hear. The truth." The silence that followed was almost unbearable. Raphael, panting, ran a hand over his face. "I was the favorite, Clara, always was. And when I realized you had achieved what I never had, merit, I couldn't bear it. I took the letter and hid it. It was supposed to be temporary, but when I saw you give up, I felt relief." Clara took a deep breath, her entire body trembling. "And you slept well all these years?" Raphael laughed bitterly. "Better than you, apparently." The answer came like a slap. Clara leaned closer, her face inches from his. "You destroyed a part of me, Raphael. But today, I destroy what's left of you." Helena stood up, desperate. "Enough! Raphael made a mistake, but he's your brother." Clara turned, her eyes cold. "And you, mother? Where were you while he did this?" The woman hesitated, her gaze wavering. I found out later, but what could I do? It was too late."
The silence that followed was deadly. Clara stared at her for long seconds. "So you chose silence. You always have." Tears were streaming now, but her voice remained firm. "You let me believe I was the problem, that the failure was mine, and I believed it for 10 years. Raphael stepped back, his face pale. "You got what you wanted. The truth. What now?" Clara replied in a cold tone. "Now comes the part where everyone pays." The candle flame flickered, and for a moment no one moved. The confession had been made, but the destruction had only just begun. The clock was almost midnight when the silence finally broke. Helena wept softly, her shoulders hunched. Paolo paced in circles, mumbling incoherent words. Raphael sat on the edge of the sofa, his gaze vacant. Clara watched the scene with an unsettling calm, like someone watching the end of a play they wrote alone. "You wanted a family Christmas," she said, pouring herself more wine. "Well, here it is. Truth, regret, and destruction. The perfect trio." Helena lifted her tear-stained face. "Why do this, Clara? Why now?" Her daughter gave a half smile. "Because now, for the first time, you're listening to me." Paolo approached slowly, his expression weary. "I should have stopped him. I knew about the letter, and I kept quiet." The words came out like a belated confession. "I just wanted peace." Clara stared at him, disappointed. "Peace isn't silence, Father. It's justice." He looked away, defeated. Raphael stood up suddenly, his voice cracking. "You got what you wanted. The truth. What now?" Clara laughed softly, a mirthless sound. "You're wrong, brother. I don't live in the past anymore. I use it." Helena tried to get closer, her hands outstretched. "Clara, please, we're your family." Clara took a step back. "Family? You left me alone when I needed it most. You watched me sink and called it a phase. I grew up alone, Mom, and now I've learned to fight alone." The fireplace crackled loudly, sending sparks flying into the air. The sound seemed to accompany the rising tension. Raphael kicked a chair, his anger exploding. "You'll end up alone, Clara. Is that what you want?" She approached slowly, her gaze serene. "No, Raphael, I want freedom, and alone is the price you pay for it." Helena's scream echoed, piercing. "Stop! This isn't love, it's hate!" Clara stared at her coldly. "Love died when you decided what I deserved." Her mother burst into tears, and Paolo, defeated, hugged her. Raphael looked at his sister one last time, hatred in his eyes, but also a trace of fear. Clara took out her phone and showed the screen.
the recording of the entire confession made discreetly during dinner. Now the world will know who you are. Helena stood up in a panic. You wouldn't do that. I would, Clara replied, and I already have.
The wind outside roared harder, and for a moment it seemed the mountain itself was shaking. Raphael collapsed onto the sofa, exhausted. Helena sobbed. Her father remained motionless. Clara turned to the window, watching the snow fall. "Merry Christmas," she said, her voice almost tender. "Now we are all at peace." Dawn arrived, but inside the house time seemed to stand still. The fireplace still crackled, casting shadows on the walls, and the smell of wine and melted wax permeated the air. Clara, exhausted, watched her family in silence, all adrift, as if the previous night's confession had ripped something from them. Helena remained huddled in a corner, her eyes red. Raphael leaning over the table, avoiding looking at anyone. Clara calmly got up and walked to the sideboard. She grabbed her cell phone and connected the recording to the living room projector. A beam of light cut through the gloom, revealing Raphael's distraught face on the wall, confessing, "I hid the letter." His voice echoed through the room like a verdict. Helena screamed, begging, "Stop it." But Clara didn't stop. "You made me believe that silence was a virtue," she said, as the video continued. "Today, silence is over." Raphael stood up, trying to snatch the phone from her hands. "You don't have the right." Clara dodged and raised the phone above her head. "I have the right you took from me, the right to be heard." The sound of the recording filled the room, the accusations, the tears, the harsh words. It was a stark portrait of the perfect family in ruins. Paolo wept silently, Helena sobbed, and Raphael staggered as if the weight of guilt itself crushed him. Clara, amidst the chaos, seemed serene. Now everyone knows who they are. The mask has fallen. With a tap, she sent the video to a group of contacts and the local newspaper's email. The headline that would forever destroy the fake family's image. Raphael rushed to her, snatching the device, but it was too late. The sound of the message echoed through the room like a gunshot. "You've ruined everyone," he shouted beside himself. "No," Clara replied firmly. "I only revealed what you've always been." Her brother stared at her with hatred and helplessness. "You have no idea what you've done." Clara stepped forward, her face close to his. "Yes, I do. I finally put an end to the fake Christmases you've celebrated for decades." Helena collapsed to the ground, repeating between sobs, "She destroyed everything." Clara looked at her, merciless. "I only gave back what you gave me." The sentence hung in the air like smoke. Outside, the wind blew stronger, and the blizzard began to ease. Clara gathered up her coat and walked to the door. Before leaving, she looked back, the room in disarray, the faces in ruins, the past reduced to fragments. "The stage is empty," she murmured, and with one last look, she crossed the threshold. Revenge was complete. The sun was rising shyly over the mountains, reflecting off the fresh snow. Clara walked along the covered road, leaving deep, solitary footprints. The cold air bit her face, but she felt something different inside, an almost comfortable emptiness, as if she finally had room to breathe. Behind her, the house slowly dwindled, a distant speck against the endless white. Inside, she knew, only the echoes of a broken history remained. Raphael, Helena, and Paolo would face the weight of exposure, the consequences, the shame. Clara, for her part, didn't look back. The pain was theirs now. In the village, the murmur was already spreading. The video had reached social media and local newspapers. The image of the model family was crumbling before everyone's eyes. Clara entered a small cafe, ordered a hot chocolate, and discreetly watched the local television. The headline flashed on the screen. "Family secret destroys reputation of local businessman."
She smiled slightly. But the smile was short-lived. Seeing her reflection in the glass, she noticed her eyes were tired. For the first time in years, there was no anger, just exhaustion. So this is what freedom costs, she thought. The price was high, but she would pay it again if necessary. Back at the house, hours later, Clara found everything silent. The family had left. The floor still bore footprints, and the smell of ash filled the air. She sat before the fireplace and watched the embers slowly die. The faint crackling sounded like a farewell. She took out a notebook and wrote, "December 24th, the day the truth spoke for me." She closed the pages and put them in her coat pocket. Outside, the wind carried the distant sound of Christmas bells. None of them sounded cheerful. As the sun set, Clara stepped out onto the porch. The snow was falling again, but now in soft, almost gentle flakes. She lifted her face and let the cold touch her skin. For the first time, she felt no fear, no guilt. She felt only peace. On the horizon, the world seemed clean, covered in white, like a new page. Clara took a deep breath and whispered, "At last, the silence is mine." The words were lost in the wind, and the snow continued to fall, silent and eternal. Time passed slowly in the mountains. Days turned into weeks, and the snow slowly melted, revealing the damp, dark earth beneath. Clara had adapted to the solitude. The house, once the scene of her revenge, was now simply home, a clean, silent, almost sacred space. She had severed all ties with the past, or so she believed. The headlines had ceased, replaced by other, more recent tragedies. Raphael had disappeared from social media. Elena had moved in with a distant aunt, and Paolo had never called again. She didn't bother to ask. Their absence was her new form of peace. Every morning she woke up, drank coffee, and watched the sun rise between the mountains, as if the world itself were beginning anew. But that afternoon, something different happened. A car slowly drove up the road, leaving mud tracks in the snow. The engine stopped in front of the house, and silence returned.
Clara, curious, opened the door. There was no one there, just an envelope left on the doormat. The paper was thick and yellowed, and in the corner, her name, Clara Alves de Mora. Her heart raced. For a moment, she hesitated to touch it. The cold seemed sharper, the wind louder. She took the envelope inside and placed it on the table. The red wax seal bore the same golden university crest, the same symbol she had seen 10 years before. A shiver ran through her. With trembling fingers, Clara broke the seal. Inside was just a folded sheet of paper and a small old photograph taken in front of the school. She and Raphael, still teenagers, smiling. On the back, in firm handwriting, a short sentence. "You don't know the whole truth about that night." Clara read and reread, trying to understand. She turned the paper over, searching for more clues, but there was no signature, no sender. Just the institution's seal and the vague scent of something ancient. The sound of the wind hitting the windows seemed louder, almost a warning. She sat down before the fireplace and placed the paper on her knees. Her mind was racing. Another lie? Another hidden story? The weight of uncertainty pressed against her chest. Everything she had built, revenge, liberation, seemed to falter for a moment. She got up and walked to the window. Outside, the mountain was silent. but Clara swore she saw something move along the road. A shadow, quickly disappearing into the trees. Her heart raced, and her breath became shallow. "Raphael?" she murmured. But there was no answer. She put the letter in her desk drawer, locking it with the same key she had previously used to lock the university envelope. The circle seemed to reopen, the past returning through the same door it had left. The house, once a refuge, seemed alive again, watching her. Clara sat back down before the fire, her eyes fixed on the flames. "If there is more truth, I will find it," she whispered. The reflection of the fire danced in her eyes, and there was something new in them. No longer hatred, no longer pain, but determination. Outside, the first snowflakes began to fall again, silent and steady. The wind whispered through the cracks in the house, and in the distant echo, it seemed to say his name. Clara smiled, slowly. "So, it's not over yet." And you? What would you do if you discovered your revenge was based on another lie? Subscribe to the channel and activate the bell, because the next chapter of this story will prove that the truth can also kill. Don't miss what comes after the silence.